Margaret Bourke-White was a leader in photojournalism, a leader in social welfare activism, and a leader for women around the world. Margaret Bourke-White exemplified the characteristics of a leader because she impacted history with her courage and determination to confront tough issues and her decisions to take whatever risks necessary to get the photographs she needed to inform people about issues in society. Margaret Bourke-White's legacy continues to impact our lives today. In the era before television and instant communication, Margaret Bourke-White witnessed and documented historic moments. Her fearless attitude to capture the events of her time and her determination to accomplish tasks that were only thought suitable for a man inspired and motivated other women to shift gender roles and to pursue their dreams. She changed forever how war and conflict are reported. Female war correspondents like Christiane Amanpour exemplify the legacy Margaret Bourke-White left for women, modern-day journalists, and war correspondents. Margaret Bourke-White photographed events from the Depression and the Dust Bowl to the battles of World War II, the liberation of Buchenwald, the partition of India and Pakistan, and the Korean War. Margaret Bourke-White climbed on skyscrapers, hung out of airplanes, went on bombing missions, and photographed Stalin, Churchill, Patton, and Gandhi. Margaret Bourke-White is considered a true American heroine and one of the 100 most influential women of all time. She traveled the world and often risked her life to tell her story. American photography critic, author, and photo historian Vicki Goldberg wrote about Margaret Bourke-White. A pioneer, she always seemed to be first, the first to do it, and then first in her field. She dared to become an industrial photographer and a photojournalist when men thought they had exclusive rights to those titles, then rose with startling speed to the top of both professions.
Her legacy was pushing photography as a medium for getting the news out. Margaret Bourke-White was very important for a whole generation of photographers coming later. In many cases, her photographs stood on their own, and so it was that combination of standing on their own and telling a story that I think was a great influence for many, many other journalists in photography.
The way we picture history is really due to her vision. You're opening your textbook and seeing that's an image she crafted and framed and composed.
In 1929, Henry Luce, the Time magazine publisher, hired Bourke-White as the first staff photographer of Fortune magazine. Margaret Bourke-White was the first Western photographer granted permission to travel to Russia to document industrialization. Margaret Bourke-White's next assignment in 1934 for Fortune made her want to photograph people more than industry. She wanted to educate American people on the social conditions of our country. She photographed the Dust Bowl where livestock were dying and farmers and their families were suffering. Then she traveled from South Carolina to Arkansas to document the living conditions of the sharecropper. On November 23, 1936, Life magazine, created by Henry Luce, was launched. Luce immediately hired Bourke-White. For her first assignment, she was sent to photograph the construction of Fort Peck Dam. Margaret Bourke-White's work on the Fort Peck Dam led to the creation of the first photo essay published anywhere. Her photograph was featured on the first Life cover. This issue of Life magazine was an immediate sellout and launched Margaret Bourke-White's career at Life. In 1937, when the Ohio River overflowed, Bourke-White immediately traveled to the scene. She was determined to take pictures, even though 3/4 of the city was underwater, and she was forced to travel through the streets by raft. While covering this devastating story, Bourke-White took one of her most famous photographs ever, entitled The American Way. The photograph depicts men and women in Louisville, Kentucky, lining up seeking food and clothing from a relief station. They stand in front of a billboard, which shows a car bearing a smiling white family and their dog. They appear to drive confidently into the future beneath the ironic slogan, "World's Highest Standard of Living." Carl Maidans, a photographer for Life magazine, said, "Margaret Bourke-White's social awareness was clear and obvious. All the editors at the magazine were aware of her commitment to social causes." By analyzing Margaret Bourke-White's personal correspondence, we clearly see the respect accomplished intellectual woman had developed by this time for Margaret Bourke-White. Amelia Earhart thanks Margaret Bourke-White for demonstrating what ability lurks within women. In a letter written in 1938, Eleanor Roosevelt calls Margaret Bourke-White a genius and Wonder Woman. Margaret Bourke-White was the first woman photographer permitted to fly on a bombing mission.
I felt that I had to go on at least one combat mission, and that was the very heart of the Air Force story. I didn't know until later the boys had bets on me. If we were attacked, would I knock out the waist gunner so that I could take pictures? Or would he knock me out so shoot his machine gun.
On April 11, 1945, Margaret Bourke-White accompanied Patton's troops as they liberated Buchenwald concentration camp. Margaret Bourke-White photographed the atrocities committed by the Nazis. Patton was so angry at what he saw that he ordered his men to get 1,000 civilians to make them see with their own eyes what their leaders had done. Bourke-White photographed these civilians who were forced to bear witness. She said, "I saw and photographed the piles of naked, lifeless bodies, the human skeletons in furnaces, and the living skeletons who would die the next day." Life magazine published many of these horrific photos in their May 7, 1945 issue, saying, "Dead men will have indeed died in vain if live men refuse to look at them." Her photographs were used as evidence at the Nuremberg trials. Margaret Bourke-White woke up our nation and our world to the torture that the prisoners of Buchenwald had endured. In March 1946, Bourke-White went to India to photograph Mahatma Gandhi and do a story on India's struggle for independence from Great Britain. She also captured the devastating violence from the 1947 partition of India and the creation of Pakistan. Margaret Bourke-White then went to South Africa to pursue a story about apartheid and racial injustice. Bourke-White told her editors, "It's the most unbelievable system. It's vicious, and it's got to be exposed." In 1952, Bourke-White went to Korea to cover their civil war. For this assignment, she carried a pistol and a longer-range carbine rifle for protection. She died on August 27, 1971 at the age of 67 after battling Parkinson's bravely for 19 years. She had just completed writing her 10th book. Richard M. Nixon, the 37th President of our nation, wrote to Margaret Bourke-White, "Your career as a news photographer sets a high standard of excellence for men and women interested in this challenging field. And we know that generations to come will look to your life as a source of inspiration and guidance." Margaret Bourke-White inspired Joan Sullivan, a photographer and social and environmental activist, to pursue photography and to persevere despite the obstacles that she'd be forced to face.
I'm a photographer who was influenced by her. She made me realize that the most important thing is just to follow your dreams. That's her legacy for me.
When I'm up there, I often think of Margaret Bourke-White. She inspired me to push myself, to do things that most other women would never even think about, to feel comfortable in a man's world, doing what I love.
Look at this photo of her about to get on the airplane. Women didn't do that back then.
I would consider her a leader primarily for three different aspects of her character and her career. First, she was highly motivated. Second, she was ambitious. And third, she was courageous.
Margaret Bourke-White was a pioneer. It was very rare for women to be in professional fields. And Margaret Bourke-White epitomizes what I think are the three characteristics of leaders, whether they're men or women. And that's passion, determination, and persistence. All of America was looking at her, was seeing her photographs, Margaret Bourke-White's photographs, as each image as a history lesson. I mean, she made some of the most iconic images of the 20th century. And those photographs were even used as evidence during the Nuremberg trials, showing the atrocities of the war.
Life magazine claims there are few other photographers among her peers and among the countless others who came after whose work can match the sustained excellence of Bourke-White's breathtaking legacy. Life magazine considers her photographs to have inarguably shifted the way the world thought from how it had thought the day before. Margaret Bourke-White bore witness to the pain and glory of our society. She has changed attitudes and changed the world. During all of her assignments, she made decisions to confront tough issues and impacted history by documenting these events for the world to see. She documented the glory of industrial development and the pain and struggles of the victims of child labor, poverty, natural disasters, apartheid, and war. Margaret Bourke-White exemplifies a leader with courage and passion, who left a legacy that inspires women to follow their dreams, not be confined by traditional gender roles, and ensures that people can never forget man's inhumanity to man.